Welcome to HKA's International Women's Day 2023. I'm Chris Bernard, a partner here at HKA responsible for our global people recruitment and quality, diversity and inclusion. So I'm really going to sort of open up with a general question. If I take 2108, that's probably not going to be in my lifetime, not even in the lifetime of my daughter. So I really want to open that up to the panel and just start to garner some views and some discussion around, should we just give up around this ambition to achieve gender equality in that respect? And I'm going to come first of all to Saran and ask Saran to please share her views on that.
First and foremost, a resounding no, we should not give up. Absolutely not. As to your question, I don't necessarily believe that it is out of reach, but I share your concern that it may not be in my lifetime, or at least within my retirement. I've listened to a recent podcast done by The Economist with Melinda Gates, and I think that she makes a very correct connection between gender equality, what that means, and she defines it as essentially as the freedom to choose what you do with your time. And she basically states that women want the freedom to make a choice with what they do with their time, whether that is choosing to stay at home and care for family or not, or join the workforce or start their own company, any multitude or combination of those things. It's the freedom to do that. And she says something interesting, that until society is able to grant women the freedom of that choice, we cannot achieve true gender equality. And I tend to agree with that. I don't think it's as bleak as 2108. I hope that's not the case, but I do agree that COVID has had significant impacts to the progress that we've made thus far. And I do believe that it is still a ways into the future. Just my thoughts.
Thank you, Saran. And I just love that phrase, freedom to choose. And it's that freedom and the opportunity, I believe, both hand in hand, that can help, if you like, mitigate against, what might seem like quite a negative sentiment. Should we just all give up? And I love the fact that you absolutely started off with a resolute no. Liz, do you want to pick up on that point around freedom to choose? And what's your general view around, should we just give up on trying to chase down gender equality, or do you have a different view to that?
Yes, I strongly agree with Saran. We should definitely not give up. That's a resounding no from me as well. Look, I think we do have a way to go. I think we have to be transparent about that. And there's, I think, a lot more that we can do to try and obviously beat achieving that by 2108, which I think we could all agree is a long way off. And I think that freedom to choose point is very important. And I think what happened in COVID, we saw a lot of, I guess, that unpaid work come into the surface again, as it has in years past, for a lot of those kind of typical female being the caregivers and males often being the kind of male breadwinners in those traditional roles in society. So I know in Australia, the Workplace Gender Equality Agency said that in Australia, currently women spend 64.4% of their total workday in actual unpaid work. which is a huge majority of their day. That's compared to 36.1% for men. So that freedom to choose, I think, is really important. But I think it's also about how do we help women achieve that in a society where they're often expected to take on roles like the caregiving. And for me, it's really around increasing the conversation on what more can we do to try and increase males participating in that. So one example of that could be trying to increase men taking more flexible work options, sharing the parental leave duties perhaps during maternity leave. There's some examples that I think that could help challenge some of those gender norms that society has unfortunately created.
Fantastic, Liz. I love where you took that to male participation, and those figures you share, they're just absolutely staggering. Over 60% of women's work is unpaid compared to 36% for men. So it's almost double. That's absolutely frightening, and that's such an untapped resource where at the moment there's so many economies that are crying out for workforce, for talented workforce, and the society and economies are literally missing out on that. And one of the factors that has been, if you like, blamed for the slowness or the reverse, in fact, of gender equality has been economic. So not just the pandemic, has been economic, and has been the war that we are now facing in Europe and Ukraine. I'm going to come to Kate next, because I'd like to kind of take this back to HKA and specifically what HKA is doing, because in terms of our ambition around gender equality, gender representation, we have made some progress, but not quite where we would want it to be. So in some respect, that does mirror what's happening in the wider society, and certainly what the UN is facing in terms of their own targets. Kate, what does this mean in terms of HKA and our own ambitions? What are we doing, and how are we looking to progress the focus on gender representation?
Thank you, Chris. Well, firstly, I have to, on Rennie Baran's behalf, send his apologies. As we know, he's our inspirational chief executive, leading a successful, improving and growing organisation. He sent his apologies because he's working on our behalf on the west coast of America at the moment, and it will be 2 a.m. when we're on this panel for him. So I'm very pleased he's putting his health first. If he was on this panel, I know that he would say 4 things. The first thing he would say is that equality, diversity and inclusion is the right thing to do in the world, and therefore he leads us to do the right thing within HKA. The second thing he would say is that he absolutely supports International Women's Day. The third thing he would say is he wants us to be our authentic selves. He is not leading a tick box exercise on equality, diversity and inclusion. So he very much wants that organic improvement within HKA. The final thing, Chris, that Rennie would say is that he really believes we've got brilliant people and we make our decisions about merit-based first. So we should hire the best people, promote the best people. But as you said earlier, we do need to make sure that we are reaching out and ensuring that more and more colleagues have opportunities and we support them, because everybody is a little bit different. And he would reaffirm that he wants an HKA that is very successful and has better gender balance within it. He knows some colleagues prefer to identify as male, female, or indeed not at all. And he just wants us to make sure that we're better balanced across the organisation. So Chris, I hope you don't mind. It was important to start there, because if he was here, he would be reminding us of those really important messages. Before I go on to your other point, is there anything you'd like to follow up on that? Otherwise, I'll answer your second question.
No, that's absolutely spot on, and thank you for sharing and giving Rennie's apologies. Yes, we would absolutely have loved to have him here.
And of course, great shout outs to Saran. It's 4 o'clock in the morning for her and 8 o'clock at night for Liz. That's passion, that's dedication, that's women saying this is important and I have a voice. I'm very proud that you've joined us, so thank you. So Chris, what is HKA doing? I think the most fundamental point for me to say here is we see this as business as usual. Edie and I, it's not a project, it's not a phase, this is just day in, day out. What are we doing to make HKA more equal, more diverse and more inclusive for everyone? So when you've made that decision, really you've got to look at how do you consistently get that change. And we're basing our approach, in fact, on the McKinsey model. McKinsey are very clear about how do you get sustainable change, and they think you have to do 4 things. You have to explain why is it important, and we spend a lot of time explaining why ED&I is important. Secondly, they say everything about your formal mechanisms has to support the why. So your processes, your policies, your behaviours, they all have to support the why. The third thing is that individually and collectively, we develop ourselves so we get more culturally intelligent. We're curious to find out about different diversity types. No one person is the expert on ED&I. We have to help each other to grow and get better skills. And last but not least, you have to have role models. And, you know, whether that's Saran, whether that's Amanda, Melanie, Haroon, you have to have role models that can explain the why and exude the very behaviours and actions that support this important business activity. So we have a programme of change that anchors on that change model, and it constantly refreshes because, of course, we keep improving. When HKA was formed in 2017, we had 31.7% of talented women worldwide. Today, we have 35.8%. So again, there's progress, there's more to do, and every one of us can put their hand up and make a suggestion, but perhaps more importantly, get involved and help us making those improvements. I can go into more detail, but I'm going to stop there. Back to you, Chris.
Thank you, Kate. Wow, I mean, you are such a champion for, you know, what we're trying to achieve. And I love that you mentioned their programme of change. I've been at HKA since July 2020, and we have been on that programme of change. And one of my key collaborators on this programme of change has been Haroon, you know, our regional head in the Middle East. We've driven a number of fantastic initiatives together, and I really want to come to Haroon at this juncture. One, as you know, the only male colleague who has attended our panel. So just to be clear, we did extend the invitation to some other male colleagues, but fantastic that Haroon has made the time to join us today. As I said, Haroon and I have worked very, very closely together with a number of other colleagues in collaborating, in really pushing our focus on gender representation in the Middle East. Haroon, let me just come to you. I want to go back to the initial assertion. Should we just give up on pushing gender equality because it's so far in the distance? And a second follow-up thought that I just want to put to you is, the power of allyship, because, you know, clearly we're talking about International Women's Day, and you're a man. So if you could pick up on is it within reach? Should we continue pushing that agenda, and what allyship means to you?
I can take up the remaining time we've got for this session, Chris, on all of those points. I think I'm the fortunate one to be on this panel as the only male, and from my perspective, touching on a couple of points that Kate just made, the program of change for me is about making marginal gains. How can we move the dial? Moving the dial will take time, and if we look at the 2108 date, that would appear daunting to many, and many would say it's not doable, it's not achievable, do you give up? And I think from my perspective, you circle back to yourself. The world is doing what the world is doing, but what am I doing in my role, in my position, in a business, in an organization, in school, in sport? What am I doing to make a difference? And I think if we all hold ourselves to account in terms of what am I doing in terms of positive action to make those marginal gains, to support that program of change and sustainable change, you can at least sleep easy at night with yourself on the account that, you know what, I'm doing something right. I'm doing something right for society. I'm doing something right for my family. And therefore the 2108 date, I don't want to say becomes immaterial. It's there. It's something that we need to try and work to. But in small pieces, we can all make a positive impact. So, yeah, I've got a resounding no, but I'm saying, what are we doing about it? And I think if each and every one of us does something about it, that date will change. And there's certain things we can't influence, certain things policymakers will influence, but those things that we can influence, we should absolutely hold ourselves to account. That are we truly making a positive change? And I think on that note, I'll touch on the allyship question. And I think Kate spoke about role models. Role models play a huge part in anyone's development, whether it's your personal development, whether it's your professional development. Role models go a long way. And it's no different in business. I think as an ally, someone who truly believes in the importance of ED&I, someone who's truly ready to call out wrongful behaviors, someone who's truly ready to ensure that everyone is getting equal chances, our policies really being adhered to. A policy is a policy. It's only as it's something written down, it's in a manual, in an employee handbook, it's great for there. But it's really the people on the ground, the people who are doing the day job, who are there to ensure it's implemented. Does it do what it says on the tin? And I think allies are people who have responsibility to their colleagues across different facets of a person's professional development. And I think they play a key role. And I suspect each and every one of us on this call will have different allies, different role models who have had a different impact on our own development over the last few years.
I was just going to pick up on a few points that people have made here and just give it my own sort of spin from, if you like, from the board perspective. And one of the things I would step back and reflect on with HKA, and it's a board I've been on for the last 3 months. I came with the new ownership under PAI. And the business continues to have huge growth ambitions, and those growth ambitions can only be fed by attraction of some of the best talent. And one of my observations is that it's getting equal kind of billing, if I can put it that way, to the kind of the commercial questions, which is, are we attracting the right talent? Are we attracting the best talent? And ensuring that talent is diverse for all of the reasons that you articulated right at the beginning of the conversation, Chris. And I thought it was important to kind of situate where HKA is on this, because all too often there are voices inside an organisation who feel quite strongly and passionately, as many of the people do here, But this is not just an issue that Rennie is feeding down, but an issue that its shareholder is, that an issue that the board are keeping an eye on. And I think as we reflect on how do we affect change in any organisation, it's important that we have those role models and we do all of the things that you've described. But at the end of the day, we need to hold ourselves to account in much the same way as we would on any other business issue. And I think it's an important context for people on this call from within HKA, from outside HKA, to kind of appreciate the scale of importance that this now takes inside the organisation. On this question of are we ever going to get there, I've been in and around this agenda for a very long time. Maybe my blonde but really grey hair demonstrates that. And it's very easy to become very discouraged by the statistics that are thrown out. And I wanted to echo Haroon's comment, which is it is about what we can do individually, but it's also what we can do as organisations, how rigorous we are. The other last thing I'd say is that we also have to think about this in the context of not just how are we being allies to people and being role models, but also how are we sponsoring them? How are we getting them the best work? How are we giving them the best opportunity? And so there's this really rich mix of things that needs to go on. And I love Kate's 4-point plan, and it's absolutely right. But the problem with 4-point plans is it doesn't speak to the 20 other actions that need to sit underneath it. And I know that Kate and her team, Chris, etc., and Liz are doing a great job of, but requires everybody to be engaged in. So I'm thrilled to be part of the new sort of the next chapter of HKA as it continues to grow. And I know that this is a central ambition for the organisation to get it right, not just on gender equity, but on all forms of inclusion. And I'm thrilled to be here.
You know, having a member of our board, especially as, you know, in the last 3 months, just reiterating how focal this is for us as a business and how aligned it is with our commercial objectives, you know, is beyond a positive position for us to be, particularly in my role. You know, it's what, if you're ever leading on ED&I in an organisation, you need to know that you've got your leadership and your board absolutely behind this. And it's, you know, as we would typically say, it's not a tick box. You know, this absolutely is part of our mission. And this is at the point where Amanda, who's recently joined us in the last couple of months, however, has had, you know, a very, very lengthy career in this topic on equality, diversity and inclusion. Plus, you know, you've authored a book about diversity, particularly within construction and the built environment. Now, Amanda, let's come to you as probably one of our newest colleagues. Really welcome hearing your views around, you know, either all of the things that have been tabled today, or indeed anything new that you want to introduce, and your observations from your first couple of months in the business.
Thanks very much, Chris. Look, it's great to be here and to be part of the HKA family. I think, you know, the fact that we've got such a diverse organisation with the global reach that we have is really significant. Like Melanie, you know, kind of coming into an organisation, it's a really good opportunity to actually think about how that organisation is set up, and I'm really pleased to say that you know, we're in a really great place. And to hear Melanie talk on behalf of the board, that allyship, that change has to start at that senior level. I know Rennie is absolutely passionate about this subject, as are many of our global leaders, and we have to have that change starting at the top, because when you actually look at the bottom of the organisation and people that are coming into the organisation or choosing to join HKA, this really matters, and they'll make an informed decision based on the culture and perception that they see and they feel that's inherent within the organisation. And we're not going to drive that change through HKA without allyship. I like the kind of analogy. It actually comes from Australia, of male champions of change, and I think, you know, that's hugely important. So we have to kind of have that diversity of voice at every level within the organisation, and really work with colleagues, particularly middle management, to make sure that they're doing the right thing around supporting our colleagues when it comes to things like promotion rounds, when we're looking at recruitment, when we're thinking about how do we spot and support our top talent to move forward within the organisation. I think, you know, the fact that we've got 35.8%, Chris, I think was your quote on sort of female colleagues around the organisation. You know, the fact that we've got a target of 50%. You know, what can we all be doing to actively encourage greater diversity to actually join our business is hugely important, because I think we still have a way to go. But I think what's really encouraging is that we're all hugely supportive of that agenda. I don't believe in the 2108 as where we need to get to. I think we have to move much more quickly than that. But we have to also recognise that the built environment, particularly construction, is not necessarily an automatic route for females to select into. And it's been a real challenge for many, many years to actually encourage people, particularly from school age, to actually think about construction as a career, and to sort of realise that you can realise your potential within this amazing field as a female and actually have a really great career. So I think I have an ask of everybody that's listening to this podcast, which is, if you could do one thing for me today, it would be pick somebody under the age of 18 and go out and tell them why you love your job, whether it's male or female, but actively encouraging more people to think about this great industry as a place to have an amazing career is something I think we all can have a responsibility around. Back to you, Chris.
Thank you, Amanda. And I think that is a brilliant call to action, incumbent on each and every one of us. And I think that also leads on to the thinking around, you know, a bit more outreach. I think as business leaders, it's absolutely incumbent on us to do more of that. I think in terms of our focus on getting brilliant people into the business, we would always look absolutely at experienced, talented, potential talent. However, we should be going back to grassroots. We should be going back into the schools and colleges, and you know, we might say a bit more about that because Amanda has got links to a university. So you know, whether you know that sort of focus on going back beyond experienced hires we should look at. But I'd like to come to Haroon because we are quite active in the Middle East with Dubai College. So, you know, we are doing a lot of that sort of outreach, grassroots work. I know we do in Americas as well, but Haroon, let me come to you to share with our audience what we're doing in the Middle East.
Sure, thanks, Chris. And I think the Middle East is an interesting place in particular, given the different jurisdictions and given the rapid change. If we're really considering moving the dial, if we look back at some of the progress that Middle Eastern countries have made in the last few years, it is quite phenomenal, whether it be the UAE or whether it be Saudi Arabia, all around policy. And that's directly had an impact on schools, colleges, professional organizations, and how they interact across the board. And I think for us, it's no different. It's about reaching out. It's about reaching out to schools. It's reaching out to that younger generation, educating them about the construction industry in the region and the opportunities that it brings. And it's very different to perhaps when people on this call were growing up and what the awareness of what construction was all about then and what it's all about now. And if you're in Riyadh or if you're in the UAE and you get to see a Zaha Hadid building and you really get to ask questions around it, it is hugely inspiring. And getting that awareness in schools is important. And I think from our perspective, when we speak to schools and we're regularly engaging with the local schools, it's that awareness point. And this rugby shirt behind is not here just for this call. It's here really as a sign of how important it is for us to reach out and work with schools. And this was an opportunity we had to sponsor the Dubai College rugby girls team for their first international trip last year on a tour to the UK. And we pioneered this with them. My colleague Jude was talking to the sports coaches to see how we could help make that trip a success. And getting them branded shirts meant that when that girls team from Dubai was on the sports fields in the UK, they looked the part, they felt the part, and they were able to participate in line with all the other colleges who were there from different parts of the world. And I think that made a difference. It made a difference from our perspective. One, we were engaging with the community. Two, we were helping young children. And three, it really talked to our various local ED&I initiatives that we were engaging with the young girls rugby team.
Thank you, Haroon. I really like the point that you've made there about the construction sector. But Kate, let me come to you. You've got your hand up.
Thank you, Chris. Just to build on what Haroon said, how we sort of collaborate globally. Obviously, I'm in London, and I actually went to watch the Dubai under-18 girls team play rugby. So we sponsored, and then we turned up. And these women, under-18s, confident, looking for companies who recognise there's opportunities, they're looking for mentors. So to Amanda's earlier point, we have to reach out, not just in money, but in time, to give these great up and coming generations of women opportunities. So I think HKA puts the money where its mouth is, but also puts time in, because it will ensure we pull in this wonderful talent that is out there and who wants to be given opportunities. So just building on Haroon's point there, back to you, Chris.
Thank you, Kate. And just to further add to that, Haroon and Kate have made some really brilliant points, and it is about talent. It's about where we source talent from. I'd like to come to Liz as our recruitment representative for our APAC region, for Liz to build further on what Haroon and Kate have just shared.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Chris. And I guess I'd start by linking to a point that Amanda alluded to in terms of reflecting on the industries that we're in. The built environment, the construction industries are heavily male-dominated environments. There is a lack of female talent coming into the market. So what we can do to improve that, I think, is key. The United Nations estimate that by 2050, 75% of jobs are going to relate to STEM areas, which is a huge percentage of jobs in the industry. And the United Nations also state that according globally, only 37% of all women actually don't use the internet. Now, that's quite a large percentage of women who aren't using the internet full stop. So we've already got quite a few barriers, I think, to attracting talent generally across the board for women. We're doing what we can here at HKA. I can speak, I hope, on behalf of the global recruitment team here, in that it is weaved into our business as usual day-to-day jobs in making sure that all of our processes, procedures and policies are very much geared towards equality, diversity and inclusion.
Thank you, Liz. A really, really good build, which actually brings me to, I think it'll be great to hear Saran's view, because I've worked very, very closely with Saran for over 2 years, and I'm completely in awe of her as an engineer, working in construction. And we've had a lot of discussion here around, the lack of representation, female representation, particularly in the construction sector, and the need to do more outreach, get back into connecting with the younger generation who will be the future leaders. So it would just be interesting if Saran doesn't mind sharing her own experience of how, your pathway into engineering and construction, whether there were barriers and how you overcame those barriers. So, really would welcome hearing from you, because I think it could be quite inspirational to, certainly myself and other colleagues who might be watching this.
Yes, I am a woman in engineering and in construction, and have suffered or gone through my own set of challenges, despite perhaps being one of the younger, more junior generations that have joined the workforce. But as with all challenges, we found ways to overcome or address those and teach those methods of overcoming to the even younger generations. Just to build on something that Haroon and also Liz and Amanda as well have talked about, is sort of the importance of partnering with the schools and promoting STEM programs for young girls in sciences and technology, engineering like myself, and in mathematics. As you know, the UN theme for this year's International Women's Day is digital, spelled digit, A-L-L, digital, innovation and technology for gender equality. And to me, this really goes back to education, right? It's a call to reduce that educational gap in technology and innovation and in STEM programs within the digital space. And so, why specifically digital technology, you might say? So I think I'm referring again to the same statistic, or the same, report that Liz mentioned, which is the UN Women's Gender Snapshot of 2022. And I just want to present a statistic that I was quite shocked by, frankly, being that women's exclusion from the digital world has shaved $1 trillion from the gross domestic product of low and middle income countries in the last decade. And I just want to pause for emphasis there and reiterate, $1 trillion in the last decade. And this loss is projected to grow to $1.5 trillion by 2025 without action. So that growth is actually exponential. And, as Haroon and Liz have said, what is that action? Well, the most obvious one is investing in those STEM programs, engaging with the educational community, going out into the colleges. And so long before I was even in the ED&I space in a more official capacity, that was something that was important to me that I was doing with the younger generations as well, is taking every opportunity to talk to young women about the importance of mathematics and engineering, and certainly not being intimidated by otherwise male-dominated fields, which we know construction and engineering to typically be. So just a few thoughts on what we've said so far.
Thank you, Saran. So obviously the data that you shared there is, shocking, and we will and can always find and unfortunately readily find such shocking data. I'd like to come back to Amanda's call to action, because I really like that, and I'm thinking as we start to sort of wrap our discussion here, to almost challenge all of us to put out a call to action, whether and be clear who we want to direct our call to action for. I like Amanda's that it's a call to action to all of us. So I'm really going to open that up now, and so whilst I'm speaking, start to think about what's your call to action to kind of use as we wind up our discussion today. A call to action to our colleagues, a call to action maybe to our clients, a call to action to people that we would want to join HKA. Both female and male, and future colleagues who may not identify as female and male. We just want brilliant people. We've got an environment that is inclusive, that is belonging, and we've got a lot more to do to continue to progress that forward. So I'm going in order of how we appear on my screen. So I'm going to come to Kate first. So Kate, what would be your call to action in recognition of International Women's Day and everything that we've discussed today on the panel?
So Chris, I would reflect on the International Women's Day theme, which, as we know, is embrace equity. We know at HKA that equality is for everyone, yet there is clearly a difference between equality and equity. And my humble interpretation of it is, yes, we want equality for everyone, but of course we're all different, and therefore we need to help each other get that same equality. And the very practical example I gave was in fact about coffee. I'm a coffee drinker, and I said, well, if everybody is allowed to have coffee, that's the equality bit, that's great. But where does the equity bit come in? And where it comes in for me is this very simple example. Amanda is taller than me, so she can just get to the coffee really easily. So what Amanda has to do for me, or what I have to have the confidence to do to Amanda, is I need to say to Amanda, can you give me a leg up? Can you get it for me? Or when she sees that I'm struggling, she says, can I help you out? That's what equity is. We all can have the coffee, but how do we help each other get to it? So I give that very simple example because it's so important. The solution is within us and within our colleagues. I hope that helps. Back to you, Chris.
It absolutely does, Kate. Thank you. And equality and equity is actually part of the International Women's Day 2023 theme as well. So I think there's going to be a lot more discussion around equality and equity to come. Melanie, can I come to you on your call to action to our viewers?
I think, there are lots of things I could think about, but my biggest is what are leaders doing? And just to build on Kate's comment, I think in every decision we make as leaders, whether it's promotion decisions, whether it's what work are we allocating to people, whether it's what choices we're making about who we take to meetings, we should be calibrating for difference. And what do I mean by that? Which is we're all guilty of it. This isn't a genderized thing where we gravitate we have huge affinity bias. We gravitate towards people often who are like us, who have common ways of thinking. And I think it takes quite deliberate reflection to think about who we surrounding ourselves with as we do our day-to-day role, and how diverse do our teams look, and how do we ensure that as we are bringing people through in the organisation, what responsibility are we taking as leaders to ensure that the people who are coming through are as diverse as the population that we have. And I can put that in a recruitment context, which I know is close to Liz's heart, and any other context. So what I plea for everybody is, whilst I'm still optimistic and I still believe, and the 2108 statistic is a reality, we have to be realistic, but that is in a global context. We can make a difference inside our own organisations, and it starts with us making more mindful and thoughtful decisions about who and what we're doing and how we're doing it. And I think if we start there, we can help ourselves understand our own biases and make a huge difference to the experience of the people we work with.
Thank you, Melanie. A really on message call to action, and you know, even more so that it's from one of our board members. Amanda, you started this whole role of call to action. Can I come to you? Either you want to reinforce your previous call to action, or you want to build on it further.
I think first thing to say, Kate, when we're on screen, we're all the equal height, and I think we have to kind of remember that we're all equal in the organisation to make a difference. But I want to build on Melanie's point. I love the wording you use, Melanie, calibrating for difference, and I think actually, you know, that's reflective of, particularly when you look at the theme of digital. You know, one of the great things that's come out of the pandemic is our ability and actually our IT teams, thank you to all of them who've actually managed to keep the show on the road during the pandemic. But also it's meant that we've had a greater flexibility and actually come together in many ways as colleagues across the globe in a way that we would never have thought possible if you go back to 2019. And I think to kind of pick up on Melanie's point, that gives us a great opportunity as a business, because one of the things you asked me what's impressed me since I joined HKA, and I think it is the superb talent that we've got within our business. And I mean that genuinely. You know, when you look at everybody in this business, they are all experts and excellent as professionals in terms of what they do. And what our digital technology enables us to do is actually bring that diversity of team to different opportunities. And I think using technology, it doesn't matter whether you're Saran over in the US or Liz in Australia, we can bring in diverse teams to work on projects. And I think to think about how we look at maybe being a bit bolder in our actions of bringing perhaps people that we haven't worked with before and giving them that opportunity, that leg up to kind of like help them do something differently, and being kind of content that effectively we're recruiting really great talent. Therefore, let's use that talent flexibly and give them the opportunity to work on different projects from around the globe, because we're working on amazing things. So I think there's a real opportunity to some of our leaders to maybe think differently about the teams that they assemble and work with on their projects.
Thank you, Amanda. I couldn't agree more, and that again is another brilliant call to action. Haroon, can I come to you?
Thanks, Chris. So mine's quite simple, and it's really building upon Mel's statement. But my call to action would be to all colleagues, all clients, and particularly our clients to be a mix of contractors, mix of employers, heavily involved in the construction industry. And my call to action would be simple. Write down a question. What am I doing to help move the dial? And answer it. Just 2 points, no more than 2, and then hold yourselves to account. Every month, every 3 months, every 6 months, the answers might start changing, the actions might start change, the actions may change, but hold yourselves to account and write down the question first. So that's my simple call to action, Chris.
Simple yet powerful. I love it. Thank you, Haroon. Saran?
Thank you, Chris. I admire and respect all of my colleagues' answers. I'll agree with everything that's been said thus far. And just to build on that, maybe to underscore or drive home the point that my call to action would probably center around one of our previous points of allyship. And, you know, just the idea that it's defined as uniting for a common interest. And we've had a lot of good conversation on the male ally and the power in that. But it's also recognizing that the male ally is not a single superhero. It's not one person. And, you know, the ally is perhaps not even a group of people. It's really sort of at a systemic level. It's the system. And as a system, we have to acknowledge any shortcomings and work iteratively. And I think that's really the operative word, is to work iteratively towards change. And so my call to action would be be part of that system that works iteratively towards change, and build it into our daily lives.
Thank you, Saran. A really, really brilliant build from what our previous colleagues have shared on their call to action. Liz, can I come to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love this call to action idea. I think it's a fantastic way to end our fantastic discussion that we've had for my evening. My call to action, I think, links similar to what Saran kind of echoed in the point of allyship. So my call to action is for anyone listening today, step up and become an active ally. You know, and be open and honest. If you're not sure exactly what you can do to help, reach out to someone that can give you some pointers of what you can do to help with that individual action. And also have the confidence to speak up and challenge any behaviours that go against anything that we're trying to achieve in terms of equality, diversity and inclusion. Challenge any behaviours and speak up and call them out when you see them as well. We are attracting a wide range of diverse talent. Amanda's alluded to the fact that we do have, I'm completely biased, but we have some fantastic talent here at HKA, and we do attract top talent in the market across not only the construction sector. We work a lot in forensic accounting. We do a lot of work in the advisory space, the technology space, environmental, water, many different sectors that we're involved in, and we are lucky to be able to attract them into the business. So we need to do what we can to support them and help them grow in their careers as HK as a family.
Thank you, Liz. I mean, I just feel so humbled and privileged to be a part of this panel and to moderate. I mean, just to recap, we've, our call to actions, we've gone from, Kate's description of the difference between equity and equality, which is, which actually is very, very different. And, I believe with the theme this year, it's going to really open up that debate. But I hope will improve the understanding of why this is so important. And Melanie's collaboration of difference, as Amanda said, I just love, I love that phrase, and tasking our business leaders, our managers to think about, the teams and the differences, and Amanda building further on that. And Haroon's around accountability. Just be accountable. At the end of the day, you can only be accountable for yourself. And Saran and Liz building further on the allyship theme. Thank you, everybody on the panel today. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Haroon. Special thanks to Saran. It must be daybreak now in Miami. And thank you to Liz. You can at last now go to bed. It must be close to 10:30 p.m. at night. Any final words from any of our panel members before we close? Kate, coming to you.
Chris, we need to thank you. You're a pleasure to work with. You champion ED&I authentically and with real action. So on behalf of our panel, thank you as well, and our colleagues in marketing who work with us to bring this to the audience as we go forward. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Kate, and a special thanks behind the scenes. They will not be on this podcast, on this recording. I have to thank Jude Wilson-Brown, who's also working on this from South Africa. So she's had to travel and she's, committed the time to do this. And also to Suzanne Rayson, who has made this a possibility. So a big thank you to our colleagues who've, behind the scenes. But, without them, this wouldn't happen. Thank you, everybody. And I hope you enjoy watching.